All right, welcome. You're watching The Week in Review with myself, Liezle Wilson. As you can see on your screens, the funeral service of the late gospel artist, Dr. Deborah Fraser, the award-winning gospel star, of course, suffered, as we know, suffered a stroke a few weeks ago. And Fraser, who had been battling diabetes for years, died on Sunday in the presence of her family at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto. The late Deborah Fraser's children say their mom embraced everyone with warmth, and they've been thanked their mom for teaching them respect and to be humble during her funeral service. Her emotional son, Kosana, says he still can't believe his mom is gone. He says he is grateful that his mom is resting and free from the pain. Fraser's emotional daughter, Alia, says she has lost a best friend with the death of her mom. All these and other stories are what we're going to focus on. Of course, the Week in Review looks at some of the big stories making headlines and looks at what's been keeping South Africans talking. Let's get straight into some of those other stories now as well, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has instructed Arts and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa to cancel the 22 million rand flagpole project after it received massive criticism from the public. Mthethwa had initially defended the project, saying that his department was entrusted with promoting social cohesion. But the minister later said he had taken note of the public discourse around the issue and that the process would be reviewed. President Cyril Ramaphosa was speaking at the Black Business Council meeting on Thursday evening.
Mthethwa comes to me. He says, "President, please tell me when I can call you." So I say, "Mthethwa, I'm in a cabinet committee meeting. We'll talk afterwards." So I call him back and he says, "President, this flag thing, which is such a wonderful initiative, it seems that our people are not happy with it." Karino, of course they are not happy. What should I do? Cancel this thing. Now I say so because we are a listening government. We listen to what our people say. We don't ride roughshod over our people. We listen. And the Minister Mthethwa was able to say, "Yes, President, we will pull this thing." And besides that, the cost was just too high. It's a wonderful project. Karino, pull it, we shelve it, we will see it. Once our economy is flying, then we will see it.
All right, to chat a little bit more about some of the top political stories this week, including President Cyril Ramaphosa having spoken to Arts and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa about the controversial 22 million rand flag project, we are joined by political analyst Levi Ndau. Very good afternoon to you, Levi. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you, Liz, good afternoon to the viewers at home.
Let's get into some of those top stories, starting off with the controversial 22 million flag proposition that we saw hearing from President Cyril Ramaphosa on Thursday night. The manner in which the decision was taken from both the Department of Arts, Sports, Arts and Culture, as well as the President, coming in to make a decision as an authority figure, the degree of consultation that was also needed for the President to act so swiftly. What's coming through on both fronts?
Well, Liza, I think it's important to note that different departments would develop their programs and, of course, have their budgets based on the programs that they have. And indeed, they need to have discussions and submit these things to the President or rather Cabinet for the actual approval. And you have a situation where, based on the mandate given to a specific department, certain things are supposed to be done that will require resources, financial, human, and otherwise. And those are the things that Cabinet has to agree and approve them. But at the same time, you will then have a situation where some of the project might be stalled, they might not be continued based on the situation on the ground. And of course, if you look at the issue relating to the 22 million flag project in South Africa, It is an important project on the basis of matters relating to social cohesion, and it had to be done if indeed approved by the department and therefore by cabinet. But I think one area that we need to look at, which has actually brought a lot of outcry, has been the timing of the project and, of course, the amount of money associated with the project. And immediately after the announcement and the motivation given by the minister, there was a lot of outcry. And the timing, I say, is based on the fact that we have got a huge disaster that has rocked KwaZulu-Natal. We actually coming from the COVID-19 pandemic, which has actually left a lot of people in the same department that Minister Mthethwa is heading quite frustrated because they couldn't make any form of income. And based on that and all other factors, I think it was important for the minister to finally have a discussion with the president. And I think the crux of the matter is that a decision has to be taken and be taken quickly. And one must actually comment that the president in his word said, Minister, you need to stop this thing based on the fact that there is an outcry out there. And also in my view, it might sound a bit insensitive to talk about spending 22 million rands whilst we've got a number of frustrating events that have taken place in the country.
All right, so Levi, you've spoken about the role of the department and the use of state money, and perhaps also how it's used to foster social cohesion and nation building at large, amongst many other issues. But you've also now spoken about the socioeconomic conditions and the pressing priorities given the timing of this announcement of the flag. And so perhaps if we look at what happened within the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture and look at the issue of leadership, decisive action, in lieu of what transpired with the 22 million flag saga, I mean, what's also being reflected on that front? We've obviously got other ministers, other portfolios, other departments who are in dire need of some decisive actions given what's happening in the country. Well, what do you make of that then?
Well, of course, the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has a simple mandate, and its name is self-explanatory. It's entertainment, it's sports, it's the improvement of cultural activities. And of course, these are the activities that would require a lot of money, and people that are outside these departments view the use of money in this department as something quite unnecessary. Whilst other people would see sports, the promotion of social cohesion, and the promotion of cultural activities as things that are quite important. And hence I'm saying that on matters relating to these ones, it depends on where one stands. Other people see the promotion of sports as money that is well spent, and other people see the symbols of social cohesion as an activity that will require a lot of financial support. But at the same time, entertainment as being entertainment, some people see it being as something that should happen at a time when people are having more than enough resources so that they are able to spend some of the monies on matters relating to entertainment. But if you look at other areas in the government, you would expect the president to take decisive action on a number of issues that are affecting society. Certain things might be beyond the ministers or beyond departments. Issues that relates to crime, issues that relates to the collapse of state-owned enterprises in South Africa. Those are the areas, in my view, that also need decisive action and strong decision-making so that the lives of ordinary citizens will be improved. If the president can also get a chance, like the chance he got now, when he was addressing the Minister of Arts, Sports and Culture, maybe should also utilize that opportunity to say, what kind of other decisive decisions is government taking on our behalf so that state resources are not unnecessarily spent, and also at the same time, decisions are taken in the best interest of all South Africans.
Absolutely. And so whilst we speak about priorities and budget allocation and also consultation at large, I also want to, go back to the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture and look at their mandate and perhaps also look at it from a different perspective. While setting aside the 22 million rand for the flagpole, given the timing, how else could that amount of money be put to use, perhaps in also maintaining some of the other important national historic sites that are being, left to decay, erode, perhaps also to serve as a means to engage with history so that we can maintain and learn from our past and value it?
Well, I think there are a number of areas that the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has to do in order to ensure that it fulfills its mandate. I think another important aspect that we need to note is that each department will require a budget to be able to run its own affairs. And the Department of Arts, Sports and Culture has to ensure that they promote sports in South Africa and make sure that young people actually participate in sport activities. At the same time, this department has the responsibility to promote culture and of course, cultural activities and make sure that children learn the different cultures that we have in South Africa. Equally, they should do so promoting the different languages that we have in South Africa. At the same time, this is the same department that is given the responsibility to promote our national symbols, to promote our national heritages, and ensure that South Africans from different backgrounds are able to come together and build one strong, united nation. The advantage or the disadvantage rather that it might have as a department is that at the time when certain projects are supposed to be initiated, are supposed to be run or implemented, certain individuals who do not see the value of sports, arts and culture might also then might be tempted to criticize the activities that this department has to embark on. But in my view, this is one of the most important departments that we need in South Africa because our background is that of a nation that has been divided through a number of aspects, and we need this department to bring all South Africans together.
Well, Levi, the interesting conclusion as we look at the broader issue of leadership and consequence management and consultation at large, being sensitive to the needs of the people, given the economy, socioeconomic status, and the timing of it all, what's being reflected from the minister, from the president, and leadership as a concept for the country?
Well, I think the decision has to be taken, and a very difficult decision. The other aspect that is important that we should note is that ministers would sign a performance contract, and it might be part of the program of the department that they have to erect a monumental features like this flag. And of course, if they do not do that, like the department of Mr. Natim Tweta, it might be seen as a failure on his part. But you also need to ensure that in the process of implementing government programs, you also need to be sensitive to what is actually happening around you, especially the situation that as South Africans we find ourselves in. As I've already indicated, the floods that have frustrated a lot of people in many parts of South Africa, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has actually frustrated a lot of our artists in South Africa. If you talk of a flag, those who are in the same department might say this money is not being used in a very, very proper manner. But one must acknowledge, of course, decision-making on the part of government to say when things don't seem to favor the very same recipients who are the citizens of South Africa, you need bold leadership. You need to be able to say, we might have had, or we might have not taken into consideration some of the important aspects that society is actually worried about. And that is why I think, in my view, through the president, this matter has to be put on hold for now.
Levi Ndau, thank you very much for your analysis. Political analyst Levi Ndau giving us an overview of some of the top stories making headlines this week here on The Week in Review. As we move on to other stories now, the Dr. W.B. Hubusana region of the ANC in the Eastern Cape is set to hold its elective conference in East London today. The region is the last to hold its conference in the province after some disgruntled members took the region to court over the alleged manipulation of branches. While some branch general meetings were where allegations surfaced of deceased and incarcerated people participating in the meetings had been marred by violence, the position of chairperson is contested by former MP and current Deputy Mayor Princess Faku, the former regional treasurer Mqedo Kumbaka, and Ward 35 branch chairperson Lunga Qam. Abongile Yankees is standing by to give us an update of what's transpiring on his end. Abongile, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Perhaps just give us an update in terms of the state of readiness, what's transpiring on your end, any challenges incurred as we're speaking.
Well, Liezle, a very good afternoon to you and to the viewers. Well, I can safely tell you now that registration is about to conclude here at the East London City Hall, and it's been incident-free, it's been free-flowing. Delegates are making their way to register, and then at 3 o'clock the conference is expected to start, Liezle. So far, nothing of that nature has occurred, but it seems to be a hotly contested region, this one of the Dr. W.B. Hubusana. It's under the Buffalo City Metro, a metro which has a huge budget. Following, you recall that it has a lot of money, it being a metro compared to other municipalities. So a lot of eyes are looking into this conference with quite interest, Liezle, and seeing that maybe after this conference there won't be a change or reshuffle into the metro, Liezle. But to tell us more about the preparations of the conference, I'm now joined by the regional coordinator, Antonio Carrols. A very good afternoon, sir, and thanks a lot for your patience. Kindly tell us, as things stand now, we are going to this conference, and there's been no measures or ways to interdict it from going ahead.
No, thank you very much, and good afternoon to your viewers. Yes, the conference is proceeding today. We have now started with the registration, which started this morning at 9 o'clock. We are intending to close the registration at 2 o'clock so that we can finalize the credentials report to be delivered in conference. Conference is proceeding. There are no challenges in conference. Everything is running smooth accordingly, and yeah, conference will proceed at 3 p.m.
Nopala, this conference has been long awaited, and your region has been you've been taking each other to court due to some disgruntled members not happy with the status quo of the region. After this conference, how will you be managing to ensure that you've united going into this conference, and that there'll be a unity, a sense of unity within this region, and ensuring that you are able to serve the people of Duncan Village, which has over 20,000 shacks, ensuring that what you stand for goes forward?
Okay. No, thanks very much. Out of this conference, remember, we are not here at conference just only to elect leadership, but we are here to deliberate on policies, and we're also here to assess where we are in terms of governance and where we would want to move to as the African National Congress in this region. Of course, yes, there were comrades that interdicted the conference that were supposed to have taken place on the 7th to the 9th of April, but due to an application that went to court, we were not able then to have conference at that time. But because where we are standing now, We have complied with all what the court has said we must do, and now we are proceeding to go to conference this coming weekend. Of course, we are in a year of unity and renewal of the African National Congress. It is their democratic right as members of the ANC to contest for any position within the African National Congress. But how we wish as the leadership of the ANC in this region that comrades, as much as they are allowed to contest for any position within the ANC, they do that within the confines and the principles of the movement. While we have a responsibility, or those who will be elected in conference have a responsibility to unite the membership of the African National Congress in this region, and it is a responsibility to lead society in this region, because the African National Congress is a leader of society at the end of the day. So the leadership that will emerge in this conference, they have that mammoth task on their shoulders to unite the African National Congress in this region.
How many branches are expected to be voting delegates in this conference?
In terms of the verification report signed off by the TG on behalf of the DSG, there is 40 branches that have qualified to participate in this conference. So 40 branches will participate.
Out of how many?
Out of 50.
Okay. With the 10 that's not going to be participating, what's the reaction from them not qualifying to be part of this conference? Will they get guest status? Will they be able to at least come to the venue of the conference, or what's the feeling from them not being able to participate as voting delegates in this conference?
Of course, they will be disappointed, because they would have wanted to form part of the conference. They would have been wanting to form part of the decision making of the conference. But unfortunately, when we go to conferences are regulated in terms of guidelines. So if they do not meet the necessary prescriptions of the guidelines, they will then not be able to go to conference. But equally so, we have invited at least 2 of those branches that would not be able to participate in conference as voting delegates to come and observe in conference and be part of the proceedings of conference.
Okay, lastly, it was expected that the provincial chairperson, Oscar Mabuyane, to come and open this conference, but we are hearing now that he won't be able to make it. Who's coming in his place to open the conference, and who can we expect to close it?
Okay, the provincial chair was scheduled to address the conference, but due to medical reasons, he is not able to come to the conference, and the deputy chairperson of the province is here, Comrade Umvoko, will then be the one that will be opening the conference. We will in due course inform the media as to who will then close the conference from the leadership of the ANC, either in the province or the national leadership that will close the conference on Sunday afternoon.
I thank you so much for your time, sir, and all the best going forward.
Thank you very much.
Well, Liezle, that was Antonio Carrols. He's the former regional secretary, now coordinator of this region. He's also vying for a second term within that position of regional secretary. We shall bring you more as events unfold.
Awungile Yankees, thank you very much for your time. Again, a developing story, a reporter in the bringing us the latest regarding the Dr. W.B. Hubusana region of the ANC in the Eastern Cape province set to hold a selective conference in East London today. As that story develops, we'll continue to bring you the latest on that front. Let's take a quick ad break and continue with more news and updates on the other side. Right, welcome back. The Week in Review continues with myself, Liezle Wilson. In other news making headlines this week, Eskom has announced that load shedding will be increased to stage 4 from 1 p.m. today until 10 p.m. tonight. Stage 4 load shedding will also be implemented again at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning until 10 p.m. tomorrow night. The power utility says this is due to electricity demands being higher than anticipated, resulting in some units having tripped. In other news, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he doesn't believe that Eskom will ever find it necessary to go to stage 8 load shedding. He was speaking on the sidelines of Thursday's presidential imbizo in Carolina in Mpumalanga.
President Cyril Ramaphosa began the day at Carolina's Dutch Reformed Church, where he had a breakfast discussion with members of the Getsiba and the district municipality's business community. The president committed government to a closer working relationship with them and warned local officials that municipalities need to ensure that they retain investments in the area. Speaking to journalists on the sidelines of the Imbizo, Ramaphosa was quizzed about the imminent increase in the petrol price, which he acknowledged would hit motorists hard. He also expressed confidence in Eskom's ability to keep the lights on, saying it is unlikely that the country will reach stage 8 load shedding, as predicted by energy expert Mike Rousseau earlier this week. Under stage 8, citizens would be without power for 48 hours over 4 days.
I don't really believe that we will go up to stage 8. I think the management is doing everything they can to ensure that they keep up with maintenance, and if it breaks down, they repair very quickly. So we're still very hopeful that we have a management that's got things under control. I think we will continue to have load shedding, but it is going to be the type of load shedding that they will warn everybody about in advance as they try everything they can to keep the lights on.
The afternoon saw the president together with his cabinet ministers engaging with hundreds of residents who attended the presidential Limbizo. Each in turn spoke of the challenges they faced, including bad roads, unemployment and the lack of water. Ramaphosa assured them that government is listening to their concerns and would follow up to ensure they are resolved.
As inflation, the cost of living is going up, had to respond by raising interest rates. But what I can say is that we will be able to emerge out of all these challenges. We are South Africans. We are made of sterner stuff. We will be able to find our feet beyond all these challenges.
Government has committed to address the challenges that were raised by the various residents of this district. Meanwhile, relevant officials are expected to return to this area with clear time frames and action plans. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Carolina, Mpumalanga.
Right, some bad news for indebted consumers as the cost of debt has increased. The Reserve Bank has hiked the repo rate by 50 basis points to 4.75%. This means that the prime lending rate is now at 8.25%, the rate that commercial banks charge customers when lending money.
It's about to be a bumpy ride for indebted consumers. The installments that they have been paying on their debt will go higher. This along with other costs going up, such as fuel and food prices. Reserve Bank Governor Liezle says rising inflation is a global problem, and raising interest rates when inflation gets out of hand isn't the mandate of the central bank. The bank now expects inflation for this year to average 5.9% from the earlier 5.8% expectation, primarily due to higher food and fuel prices.
As a central bank with a price stability mandate, we see it as our responsibility to protect the incomes of working people by capping the rise in inflation. So the policy stance that we are taking here, we deem it to be appropriate and to be responding to the cries of South Africans when prices are rising. We have got a responsibility to cap inflation because inflation is eating into the incomes of the working people in South Africa. We have got to live true to our mandate, and we will not allow inflation expectations thus to de-anchor.
With the rising interest rates, for consumers with a bond of 500,000 rand at prime lending rate, the bond repayment will go up by 155 rand. For a 1 million rand bond at prime rate, the repayment will go up by 312 rand. One economist says this increase in interest rates will put pressure on households that are already struggling.
I'm looking more on a social level. So I'm looking at small businesses. I'm looking at the level of poverty that we're experiencing in the country and the very high youth unemployment that we're experiencing right now. There are large numbers of people leaving entering into the workforce or leaving school, and they are finding it very difficult. And that is going to put a lot more pressure on households in the moment. Households are struggling with where to put where to spend. The bucket of income is really, really tight for them.
The Reserve Bank has revised downwards expected economic growth for the local economy to 1.7% for this year, from an earlier 2% forecast. It says this is due to a combination of short-term factors, including the flooding in KwaZulu-Natal and continued electricity supply constraints. Gloria Sefakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Oh, in other news, S&P Global Ratings has lifted South Africa's credit rating to positive. The agency has also affirmed the country's long-term foreign and local currency debt ratings at BB- and BB, respectively. S&P said recent favorable terms of trade in South Africa has been a major factor in its decision. It's added that the country's reasonably large net external asset position, flexible currency, and deep domestic markets provide strong buffers against shifts in external financing. S&P also expects South Africa to post a current account surplus for the third consecutive year. This as prices for key metals and mining exports have risen significantly since the start of the war in the Ukraine. Government has welcomed the move by S&P. Perhaps for more on the top economic stories of the week, we're joined by Mielani Mkabela, Chief Executive at Antwisa Transactory Advisory. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
Thanks, and viewers of SABC.
Right, let's look at, what transpired this week. Let me start with this. Was the repo rate hike move necessary?
Yes, we have seen the repo rate hike by 50 basis points, which was expected by most of the economists in the country. And then when we look at several repo rate forecasts have predicted, that 50 basis point, and then that really as well satisfied most of the economists' expectations and the forecast precisely to manage price stability and ensure that we don't have much of the challenges from the global market and as well food prices like locally and transportation prices.
Well, speaking about managing price stability, how is this decision ultimately going to impact borrowers, investors, and the economy that seems to already be struggling?
So, like when you look on the impact from the global market because of the imports, it can be imports of oil and imports of some of the food prices like wheat, you will find that it will come to our market with a higher prices, but at the same time we will have as well challenges of affordability. This is for a short time. While this is happening, you will find that customers that might not be probably affording, they might be excessively using their credit cards or credit facilities. And from that, when the repo rate is increased by 50 basis points, it can as well assist in managing the consumers not to accelerate our inflation above above 6%, which is within our target range of 3 to 6%.
So, Mielani, on that note, we also understand that this is the biggest margin in more than 5 years. What do you think led to this decision? And in the same breath, is there a possibility of further hikes?
There is a possibility of further hike, but the rate hike for May was mainly to manage the global market. And then you have seen the U.S. market and the the Federal Reserve on its repo rate hiking. So when you look at that, while we are in a global crisis that it is not really anticipated as to when it will end, you will need to see the South African monetary system to come up with measures to probably manage that, not to have domestic problems. And I think when you look at how the 50 basis point was hiked, it will really as well assist. The market, and we will be able to see what will probably happen in the next 2 months before the July MPC meeting.
Well, some good news also coming through. Let's look at, S&P's decision, their lift. What does this ultimately also mean for the average consumer going forward in conclusion?
I think this is a positive news for South Africa, and it is a sign that some of the reforms are being met by corporates and mainly. Looking at investment and attraction, when you look on the past investment conference by the president, I think that had a positive outlook. And then when you look at sectors, you look at the commodity sector that is really boosting the South African economy in this difficult time. And I think we are still supposed to see more good news, and as well other rating agencies to be probably reviewing our outlook to a positive or to a better rating.
All right. Thank you very much for the conversation, Mialani. Again, always a pleasure having you on. Mialani Mkabela, Chief Economist at Antsuisa Transaction Advisory, chatting to us about some of the top economic stories that transpired this week in South Africa. As we take a look at other news now, though, the National Credit Regulator has welcomed the judgment handed down by the National Consumer Tribunal against MSR Financial Solutions. The investigation revealed that the entity was contravening the National Credit Act. The tribunal has imposed an administrative fine on the company, which was offering a debt counseling services without the necessary approval.
Says MSR Financial Solutions provided alternative dispute resolution services while it was not registered to offer the service. The company was also unlawfully offering debt counseling services. This led to consumers paying fees for a service which they did not receive. The company has now been ordered to refund fees and costs to consumers. The NCR says there's been an increase in the number of companies that are illegally operating as debt counselors, and has called on consumers to ensure that they are dealing with reputable companies when undertaking debt review.
There's certain entities that are, frankly, just criminal enterprises. And the way they make money here is purely through fraud. So a consumer, they would advise a consumer that we will rearrange your debt payment obligations for you, and you must pay us directly. And the consumer starts paying them directly, and those funds never get distributed to credit providers. That's outright fraud.
Signing up for debt counseling can help you manage your debt and protect you against creditors, and only a registered debt counselor can make a determination of whether or not you are over indebted. The debt counselor can also negotiate a favorable interest rate for you, but this will also depend on your credit score.
The debt counselor looks at your debt holistically and sees if you're over indebted, cannot afford to repay your debt every month, and then they by law through the National Credit Act renegotiate on your behalf with your credit providers to reduce those monthly debt repayment installments by extending the repayment term accordingly.
Debt Rescue says the tough economic conditions are leading to many people undertaking debt review, but has urged consumers to ask the relevant questions when undergoing debt review.
Obviously, we know we're still sitting with the after effect of the pandemic. We know what it's done to joblessness and our unemployment figure being at record highs. We also know that currently we have a scenario of our inflation rates are very, very high. And that's going to lead to the interest rates continuing to increase until we get that under control.
The National Credit Regulator says it has deregistered several credit providers for contravening the National Credit Act. These companies have also been referred to the National Credit Tribunal for prosecution. Consumers are urged to ensure that the companies they are dealing with are registered with the National Credit Regulator.
We need assistance from the public because we can only act when we receive information which indicates that there's unlawful conduct going on. So I would appeal to members of the public if they if they are aware of an entity that they think is acting in contravention of the National Credit Act, to submit that information to us or lay a complaint with us. We would most certainly look into it.
Understanding and analyzing your financial situation will go a long way towards assisting you to make the right financial decisions, and it all starts with proper budgeting and monitoring what you spend your money on. If you are unable to pay the minimum amount required to service your debt, then this could be a sign that you need to undertake debt counseling. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, the 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour has come to an end. 2,000 delegates gathered in Durban to work towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 8.7, which aims to end all forms of child labour by 2025.
It was established at the conference this week that efforts to eradicate child labour have slowed since 2016, when the world recorded that 152 million children are in child labour. Since then, the number has gone up by 8 million to 160 million. Africa accounts for 80% of this number. Socio-economic challenges contributed the most to this increase.
So this conference has first looked at the drivers, and it's clear that increased poverty, the global economic downturn is a key driver, families becoming hard up for cash and therefore resorting to bringing children into the labor market to complement family income. We have also seen the impact of COVID, because as the economies were closed, many people ran short of cash. They also resorted to increased child labor. So as we try to accelerate, upscale and push towards meeting the goal of 2025, the key 3 areas I want to highlight is, again, integrated policies highlighting the importance of social protection, highlighting the importance of education, highlighting for the younger adults the importance of quality tertiary education, the role of business, not only to not support child labor, but also to be at the forefront of ensuring that their workforce is a workforce that does not work with child labor.
Government, labour and business have committed to work towards SDG 8.7, even though the target is likely to be missed. The many aspects that give rise to the child labour were discussed this week, including the role that education can play, as well as the financing of it.
The emphasis was on making education universal to all the children of the world, because at the moment we are aware that children are not accessing education. So at least if there's a conscious effort of making sure that we shift fiscal spending from other areas and concentrate on such things as education, health and so on. So this is trying to reimagine how we do public financing or in countries, because at the moment you find that the reason education, even health and other social protection measures are not getting as much as they should is because they are competing with other priorities. So in order to deal with this, we are suggesting that as the Sustainable Development Goals have suggested, that let us try to ramp up on projects that have to do with poverty alleviation and so on. So that is the key point that, in my view, came out of the discussion on education. The second question concerns the financing. Yes, we have all the DFIs and other institutions on board. We hope that we can put money together. But of course, again, even at international level, there are competing priorities. As you might know, that such things as climate change, they also demand a lot of money as well. Now, when we move to this, there's also an issue. But we also see some companies, such as Liezle, which sort of tries to go backwards and work with their suppliers downstream and support them in order to improve wages. So there are all sorts of other interventions that are ongoing at the moment.
Discussions here were geared towards the development of a Durban call to action, a declaration that will be formally adopted on Friday. This was the first time that this conference included the voice of children in the way that it did. The conference hosted over 60 young people from across Africa and the world. These youngsters even managed to develop their own Durban call to action.
Governments should consider a multi-stakeholder approach on protecting the rights of the child.
Richer countries should commit to providing official documents assistance for poorer countries, especially in cases of emergencies. For an example, providing safe spaces for shelters that can be used to empower the children and their parents or caregivers on matters pertaining to child labor.
Children and young people's voices matter. They are able to articulate their issues better when they are properly engaged. Ensuring the active participation of children and young people in key decision-making places, which includes conferences and the formulation of national action plans to protect children from labor and harmful work.
Deborah, SABC News, Durban.
Well, in other news, Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has denied a claim that he sexually harassed a flight attendant aboard a private jet in 2016. According to a report on the website Business Insider, SpaceX paid the accuser $250,000 not to file a lawsuit over the alleged incident. Here is Spitzer reports from San Francisco.
The Business Insider article quotes an unnamed friend of the flight attendant, also unnamed, who says that Elon Musk allegedly exposed himself to the woman during a flight on a private SpaceX plane in 2016. The article goes on to say that she was eventually paid $250,000 in severance by the company in exchange for not filing a lawsuit over the incident. The world's richest man, a native of Pretoria, lashed out at the accusations on Twitter, calling them utterly untrue and suggesting that the timing of the article is politically motivated. Musk has recently been highly critical of U.S. President Joe Biden and his Democratic Party. He recently said that the real U.S. president is whoever controls the teleprompter and accused the Biden administration of doing everything it can to sideline and ignore Tesla, the world's largest electric vehicle maker. He also said he plans to vote Republican in upcoming elections despite voting for Democrats in the past. Musk has said he wants to buy Twitter to allow more of what he calls free speech on the platform and tweeted that the Business Insider piece was an attempt to interfere with that acquisition. Business Insider released a statement saying that it stands by the story and that it is based on documents and interviews and speaks for itself. Ira Spitzer, SABC News, San Francisco.
All right, we'll leave it there for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Tomorrow we take a look at the week ahead. From myself, Liezle Wilson, and the rest of the team. Until then, it's goodbye for now. Do take care.